I was just 8 years old when my mom passed away. She had been sick for a while, but nothing prepared me for the emptiness her absence left. Dad remarried quickly, and soon after my half-brother Jason came along. While Dad showered Jason with attention, I found solace with my grandmother in her beautiful Victorian home in Cambridge. She became my rock, my true north. Years later, when she left me that house in her will, I never imagined Dad would sell it behind my back. I laughed, and a week later when my lawyer called him, before I tell you what happened when my lawyer called him, let me know where you're watching from and hit that like button if you've ever had to stand up for what's rightfully yours. Growing up without my mom was tough. After she died when I was 8, my world changed completely. Dad seemed to check out emotionally, at least when it came to me. He moved on quickly, marrying Stephanie, barely a year after Mom was gone. I still remember the wedding day standing there in an uncomfortable suit that was slightly too big, feeling like I was watching strangers exchange vows rather than my own father. When Jason was born 2 years later, I watched Dad transform into the attentive, loving father I had desperately wanted him to be for me. Every weekend was filled with Jason's baseball games, shopping trips, and family outings where I often felt like an afterthought. "Bryant, why can't you be more like your brother?" became a familiar refrain at home, even though Jason was 7 years younger than me and had advantages I never did. Thankfully, I had Grandma Marion. After Mom died, I started spending weekends at her Cambridge Victorian home, and those weekends gradually turned into weeks, then months, until it became clear to everyone that I essentially lived with her. Dad never objected. I think he was relieved, honestly. "A boy needs consistency," Bryant Grandma would say, as she taught me to balance a checkbook or iron a shirt properly, and he needs to know his value doesn't depend on anyone else's opinion. Unlike Dad, she celebrated my academic achievements and encouraged my interest in numbers and finance. With her support, I worked my way through college, earning an accounting degree with honors. I took out student loans and worked part-time at the campus bookstore, determined to make my own way. Meanwhile, Dad paid for every cent of Jason's education at an expensive private university where my brother majored primarily in partying and networking. None of this would have mattered so much if Grandma Marion hadn't been the most important person in my life. Her home on Brattle Street was my true home, filled with the scent of her famous apple pie and the warmth of unconditional love. The 3-story Victorian, with its intricate woodwork, stained glass windows, and wrap-around porch, wasn't just a valuable piece of real estate worth around $1.2 million. It was the only place I felt I truly belonged. "This house has history, Bryant," she would tell me as we sat on the porch swing. "5 generations of our family have lived here. Someday it will be yours, and I hope you'll love it as much as I do." I treasured those conversations, never imagining how prophetic her words would be. When Grandma Marion was diagnosed with advanced pancreatic cancer last year, the prognosis was grim. I took family leave from my accounting firm to care for her in her final months, sitting beside her bed, reading her favorite Jane Austen novels, and listening to her stories about my mother as a young girl. "Bryant," she said one evening, as the sun set through her bedroom window, "I want you to know that this house is yours when I'm gone. I've made it clear in my will. Your mother would have wanted you to have it." I held her hand, too choked up to speak, but deeply grateful for her love. She passed away peacefully 6 months ago. At the reading of the will, there were no surprises. As Grandma had promised, she left me the Victorian home, along with some family heirlooms and a modest savings account. Dad and Jason attended the reading, and I couldn't miss the look they exchanged when the lawyer confirmed I had inherited the house. Dad's lips tightened, and Jason scoffed audibly, but neither said anything directly to me. I was overjoyed, despite my grief. The house needed some updates, but I looked forward to preserving its character while making it my own. I already had plans to restore the original hardwood floors in the dining room and update the kitchen with new appliances while keeping its vintage charm. Then came an unexpected opportunity at work. My firm offered me a 3-month assignment in Chicago, helping a major client reorganize their financial systems. It was the kind of opportunity that could fast-track my career, and while the timing wasn't ideal with the house, I decided to accept. I'll move in properly when I get back. I told myself packing just enough for the temporary relocation. I arranged for the utilities to remain on and asked my grandmother's longtime neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, to keep an eye on the place. "Of course, dear," she assured me. "Marion would want me to look after things until you're settled. I have your number if anything comes up." I gave her a spare key and left for Chicago with a light heart, calling every week to check on things. Each time, Mrs. Patterson assured me everything was fine with the house. I threw myself into the work in Chicago, impressing the client and my supervisors. Life was finally looking up, and I felt like Grandma Marion was somehow watching over me, proud of what I was accomplishing. If only I had known what was happening back in Cambridge. I finished my Chicago assignment a week earlier than planned, excited to finally begin my life in Grandma's house. My house now. After 3 months of living in a sterile corporate apartment, I couldn't wait to be surrounded by familiar walls and memories. I drove straight from the airport, my car packed with everything I'd taken to Chicago, eager to sleep in my childhood bedroom one last time before moving into the master suite. As I turned onto Brattle Street, something felt off. There were moving vans in the neighborhood, which wasn't unusual for Cambridge in the summer. But as I got closer to Grandma's Victorian, my heart dropped. A large red sold sign stood on the front lawn, and people were moving furniture inside. My house. The house I had inherited. I screeched to a halt, nearly causing an accident, and jumped out of my car. "Excuse me," I called to a man carrying a floor lamp toward the front door. "What's going on here?" He looked confused. "We're moving in. Just bought the place." "That's impossible," I said, my voice rising. "This house belongs to me. I inherited it from my grandmother." The man set down the lamp and pulled out his phone. "Look, buddy, I don't know what you're talking about. We bought this house legally. I have all the paperwork." He showed me photos of signed documents, and there it was, a deed transfer dated just 3 weeks earlier. My head spun. This couldn't be happening. "Who did you buy it from?" I managed to ask. "Guy named Alan Lawson. Said he was handling the sale for his son." My father, my own father, had somehow sold my house while I was away. I mumbled something to the confused new owners and got back in my car, hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. I knew exactly where to find him. 20 minutes later, I pulled into Dad and Stephanie's suburban driveway. Their sprawling colonial house, with its perfectly manicured lawn, had always felt cold to me. Today, it felt like the scene of a crime. I found them by the pool. Dad and Jason were lounging in deck chairs, drinks in hand, looking like they didn't have a care in the world. Stephanie was arranging flowers at a table nearby. They looked up, surprised to see me. "Bryant," Dad said, not getting up. "Thought you were in Chicago until next week. You sold my house," I said, my voice deadly quiet. "Grandma's house. The house she left to me in her will." Dad took a sip of his drink, completely unfazed. "I did you a favor, son. That old place was a money pit. Property taxes alone would have crushed you." "You had no right," I said, struggling to keep my composure. "That was my inheritance, my property." "Oh, please," Jason chimed in, rolling his eyes. "You never even lived there full-time. What do you need a huge house like that for?" Dad nodded. "He's right. We found a buyer willing to pay $1.2 million, which is generous considering the work that place needs." "Where's the money I demanded, though?" I already suspected the answer. Dad waved his hand dismissively. "Being put to good use. Jason had some expenses that needed taking care of." "Expenses?" I echoed in disbelief. "Just some credit card debt," Jason said with a smirk. "Those European vacations last year weren't cheap, you know." Dad actually had the audacity to smile. The money will go to pay off your brother's vacation debts. He's young, got a bit carried away. It happens. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. A bit carried away. How much debt are we talking about? About 80 grand, Dad replied casually, as if discussing the weather, plus some other investments Jason and I are making. $80,000 in vacation debt, and they were using my inheritance, my grandmother's legacy, to bail him out. I looked at Stephanie, hoping for some sign of support, but she avoided my gaze, pretending to be absorbed in her flower arrangement. "You can't do this," I said, my voice rising. "That house wasn't yours to sell." "Already done," Dad said flatly. "Papers are signed. New owners are moving in. Time for you to move on, Bryant. Be a team player for once," Jason added. "Family helps family." I was speechless. The betrayal was so complete, so casual, that I couldn't even form words. 24 years of feeling like an outsider in my own family culminated in this moment, this ultimate betrayal. "You did me a favor," I finally managed to say. "By stealing my inheritance, by forging documents, because that's what you must have done." Dad's expression hardened. "I did what needed doing. That house was wasted on you. Just like everything else we've tried to do for you over the years." I looked at them, these people who were supposed to be my family, and felt something break inside me. Without another word, I turned and walked away, ignoring Dad's calls to stop being so dramatic and get over it. Back in my apartment, I finally allowed myself to fall apart. I called in sick to work and spent 3 days barely eating or sleeping, just staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of my relationship with my father and brother, wondering if I had somehow deserved this betrayal. On the 4th day, my phone rang. It was Mrs. Patterson, worried because she'd seen the new people moving into the house. "Bryant, dear, what's happening? I thought you were moving in when you got back from Chicago." As I explained the situation, her gasps of disbelief gradually turned to anger. "Your father was here several times while you were gone," she revealed. "He told me you had asked him to handle selling the house because you'd decided to take a permanent position in Chicago." "I never said that," I replied, sitting up straight. "I never gave him permission to do anything with the house." "I had a feeling something wasn't right," Mrs. Patterson said. "The way he was rushing everything, bringing people through at odd hours. Bryant, I think you need to talk to a lawyer." For the first time in days, I felt a spark of something other than despair. It was anger, yes, but also resolve. "Mrs. Patterson, did you see him with any documents? Anything he might have claimed?" I signed. "Yes," she said slowly. "He showed me what he said was a power of attorney giving him the right to act on your behalf. I thought it was strange, but he said you were too busy with your new job to handle things. A power of attorney I never signed. Documents I never approved. This wasn't just a family betrayal anymore. This was fraud." The next morning, I called in to work and took a personal day. I needed answers, and I needed them now. My first stop was Mrs. Patterson's house. She welcomed me with a sympathetic hug and a cup of tea. "I kept an eye on things just like I promised your grandmother," she said, settling into her armchair. "Your father started coming around about a month after you left. He claimed you had called him, asking for help selling the place because you'd decided to stay in Chicago permanently." "I never said anything like that," I confirmed. "My plan was always to move into the house when I got back." Mrs. Patterson nodded. "I suspected as much. Marion was very clear about leaving you that house. But your father had documents, Bryant. He showed me a power of attorney with your signature. My signature was forged," I said firmly. "Did you notice anything else? Unusual?" "Yes. The people who came to see the house, they were all friends of your father. The man who eventually bought it, I recognized him from the golf club where your father plays. They seemed very chummy, agreeing on the price immediately. 1.2 million, which I thought was low for that property and location. This was getting worse by the minute. Not only had Dad forged my signature, but he'd sold the house below market value to a friend, someone who might have been aware of the questionable nature of the sale. And there's something else, Mrs. Patterson added, lowering her voice. I overheard your father and brother talking on the porch one evening. Your brother was worried about some credit card companies taking legal action. The amounts they mentioned were staggering, Bryant. Tens of thousands on multiple cards. I felt sick. Jason had racked up massive debts, and Dad had stolen my inheritance to bail him out. The $80,000 figure Dad had mentioned was probably just the tip of the iceberg. Thank you, Mrs. Patterson. You've been more family to me than my own father. Marion would be heartbroken by what he's done, she said, patting my hand. You fight this, Bryant. That house is yours. My next stop was a real estate attorney recommended by a colleague. Amanda Wilson's office was in downtown Boston, her credentials impressive. She listened carefully as I explained the situation. To be clear, she said, when I finished, you never signed a power of attorney authorizing your father to sell the property. Never. I was in Chicago on a temporary work assignment. I had every intention of moving into the house when I returned, and the property was left to you directly in your grandmother's will. Yes, it was very specific. Amanda nodded, making notes. Mr. Lawson, what your father has done constitutes fraud. He forged your signature and misrepresented his authority to sell property that legally belonged to you. Can we get the house back? I asked, hope rising. Possibly. We need to see the exact language of your grandmother's will. Sometimes there are clauses that prevent quick sales of inherited property. I provided her with a copy of the will, and her eyes widened as she read. Mr. Lawson, did you read the entirety of your grandmother's will? I was grieving, I admitted. I focused on the part where she left me the house. There's a clause here, Amanda said, turning the document toward me. It specifically states that the Cambridge property cannot be sold within 1 year of her death without the approval of her estate's executor, who is not your father, but her attorney, Richard Dawson. This is extremely fortunate for us. I scanned the clause, my grandmother's foresight bringing tears to my eyes. She had anticipated something like this might happen. She had protected me even after she was gone. What does this mean for the sale? I asked. It means the sale was invalid from the start. Your father had no legal right to sell, and the anti-sale clause provides additional protection. We have a very strong case, Mr. Lawson. As Amanda outlined our legal options, I learned that my father's actions weren't just morally wrong, they were criminal. Forgery, fraud, misrepresentation. The potential consequences were serious. Do you want to pursue this? Amanda asked. It will likely mean criminal charges against your father. I thought about all the years of feeling like an outsider in my own family, about Grandma Marion's love and protection, about the casual way Dad and Jason had dismissed my inheritance as something they could appropriate for themselves. Yes, I said firmly, but first I want to give my father one chance to make this right, one chance to avoid the legal consequences. Amanda advised against this, concerned my father might try to hide assets or create more problems, but I insisted. I need to know I tried everything before taking this step. She reluctantly agreed. We'll document everything and prepare the case, but we'll give your father 48 hours to reverse the transaction before we file. I left her office feeling something I hadn't felt in days' strength. My grandmother had taught me to stand up for myself, and it was time I honored that lesson. That evening, I drafted an email to my father, copying Jason and Stephanie. It was brief, and to the point. I knew what they had done. I had consulted an attorney. They had 48 hours to contact me to discuss reversing the fraudulent sale, or I would pursue all legal options available to me. Dad called within minutes, his voice angry rather than contrite. You're threatening legal action against your own family. After everything we've done for you, what exactly have you done for me, Dad? Besides, sell my inheritance to pay for Jason's vacations. You ungrateful. He began, but I cut him off. I'm giving you one chance to fix this. Meet me at Amanda Wilson's office tomorrow at 10 a.m. Bring Jason. We'll discuss how to unwind this mess you've created. And if I refuse, then I'll see you in court and possibly watch you face criminal charges for fraud and forgery." There was a long silence before he finally agreed. I hung up, shaking but resolute. For the first time in my life, I was standing up to my father, and it felt long overdue. The next morning, I arrived at Amanda's office, 15 minutes early, my stomach in knots, but my resolve firm. She greeted me with a reassuring smile and led me to a conference room where we reviewed our strategy. "Remember," she advised, "stay calm no matter what they say. We have the law entirely on our side." At precisely 10 a.m., the receptionist announced the arrival of Alan Lawson, Jason Lawson, and Stephanie Lawson. They entered the conference room looking like they were walking into battle. Dad in front with his shoulders squared, Jason behind him, trying to match his confident stride, and Stephanie trailing with obvious discomfort. "Let's make this quick," Dad said, not bothering with greetings, as he took a seat across from me. "Bryant, this family drama needs to stop." Amanda introduced herself. "Mr. Lawson, I'm Amanda Wilson, representing your son Bryant in this matter." Dad waved dismissively. "We don't need lawyers for a family discussion." "I'm afraid we do," Amanda replied calmly, "given that this family discussion involves fraud, forgery, and the illegal sale of my client's property." Jason snorted. "Always so dramatic, Bryant, just like when we were kids." I remained silent, letting Amanda lead, as we had agreed. "Here are the facts," she continued, sliding documents across the table. One Bryant Lawson inherited the Cambridge property from Marion Emerson, his grandmother. 2 Bryant never signed a power of attorney authorizing anyone to sell this property on his behalf. 3 Marion Emerson's will contains a specific clause preventing the sale of the property within 1 year of her death without approval from the executor Richard Dawson. Dad barely glanced at the papers. "I was acting in Bryant's best interest. He doesn't need a house that size." "That wasn't your decision to make," I finally said. "And we both know this wasn't about my best interests. It was about bailing out Jason." Bryant Stephanie spoke up, her voice hesitant. "Your father thought he was helping both of you." "Jason needed the money, and the house was just sitting empty." "Temporarily empty," I corrected, "while I was on a 3-month work assignment that Dad knew about." Amanda placed another document on the table. "We have obtained a copy of the sales contract. The Cambridge property was sold for $1.2 million to Gregory Phillips, a member of Mr. Alan Lawson's golf club. The market value of the property is closer to $1.7 million. Dad shifted uncomfortably. "Greg gave me a fair price, considering the work that place needs." "Did Greg know you didn't have the legal right to sell?" I asked pointedly. The flicker in Dad's eyes told me everything. His golf buddy had known this was shady, but had gone along with it for the discount. "Furthermore," Amanda continued, "we have evidence that the signature on the power of attorney document is forged. We're prepared to bring in a handwriting expert to testify to this fact." "This is ridiculous," Jason interrupted. "Dad was just trying to help me out of a tough spot. It's not like Bryant needs the money anyway. He's got that fancy accounting job, a job I worked hard for," I said evenly. "Unlike the series of positions Dad has arranged for you, which you've either quit or been fired from." Jason flushed red. "At least I know how to enjoy life. While you count pennies like Grandma taught you, I actually live. By maxing out credit cards for European vacations you can't afford," I shot back. "That's not living, Jason. That's being irresponsible and expecting others to clean up your messes." Dad slammed his hand on the table. "Enough." "Bryant, what do you want, money? Is that it? I can give you some of the proceeds from the sale." "Some," I repeated incredulously. "The entire amount belongs to me, Dad." "But no. What I want is for you to unwind this fraudulent sale and return my property to me." "That's impossible," Dad protested. "The sale is done. People have moved in." Amanda leaned forward. "Mr. Lawson, let me be clear about the situation you're in. You committed fraud and forgery. These are criminal offenses that carry potential jail time. Additionally, the sale violated the terms of Marion Emerson's will, making it invalid from the start. Dad's face paled slightly, but he maintained his defiant expression. You wouldn't press charges against your own father. Try me, I said quietly. Amanda laid out our proposal. Dad would contact Gregory Phillips and explain the situation. He would use his own funds to compensate Phillips for the inconvenience, and the house would be returned to me. Additionally, Dad would repay any of the proceeds from the sale that had already been spent, and if I refuse, Dad asked, though his bravado was clearly wavering, then on Monday morning we file a lawsuit against you for the return of the property damages and legal fees. We also provide evidence of forgery and fraud to the district attorney's office for criminal prosecution. A heavy silence fell over the room. Jason looked stunned, as if the reality of the situation was finally hitting him. Stephanie stared at her, hands folded in her lap. Dad's face cycled through anger, disbelief, and finally a grudging recognition. I need to think about this, he finally said. You have until 5 p.m. today, Amanda replied firmly. After that, we proceed with legal action. As they stood to leave, I locked eyes with my father. Dad, Grandma Marion raised me to stand up for myself and what's right. That's what I'm doing now. He didn't respond, but for the first time I thought I saw a flicker of something like respect in his eyes. At 4:30 that afternoon, Amanda received a call from Dad's attorney. He agreed to our terms. The sale would be reversed, with Dad personally compensating Gregory Phillips for the inconvenience. The new owners would be given 30 days to find alternative housing. 1 week later, my lawyer called my father with the official paperwork to sign. When he saw the ironclad legal language and penalties for any future attempts to interfere with my property, the color drained from his face. He signed without argument, finally understanding that I was no longer the compliant son he could manipulate. It took nearly 2 months to fully resolve the situation with the house. Gregory Phillips was initially resistant to returning the property, but faced with evidence that he had participated in a potentially fraudulent transaction, he eventually agreed to Dad's settlement offer. Throughout this time, I had minimal contact with my father and Jason. Stephanie called once to try to smooth things over, suggesting a family dinner to put this all behind us. I declined politely but firmly. Some betrayals run too deep for a quick reconciliation over pot roast. When I finally got the keys back to my grandmother's house, I stood on the porch for a long time before entering. The new owners had barely begun renovations, but the house already felt different, emptier somehow, as if the spirit of my grandmother had retreated during the turmoil. As I walked through the rooms touching familiar walls and woodwork, I realized something important. While I had won the legal battle, the house no longer felt like the sanctuary it once had. It was tainted by the betrayal, by the knowledge that my own father had been willing to steal it from me. I sat on the window seat in what had been Grandma's bedroom, looking out at the garden she had tended so lovingly, and I could almost hear her voice. Houses are just buildings, Bryant. Home is where you honor your values. After much reflection, I made a decision that surprised even me. I decided to sell the house properly this time, with all legal requirements met. I worked with a reputable real estate agent who marketed the property extensively. It sold for $1.8 million, significantly more than the price Dad had accepted. With the proceeds, I did several things. First, I bought a smaller but charming townhouse in a neighborhood I loved. It didn't have the history of Grandma's Victorian, but it was mine unburdened by painful memories. Second, I established the Marion Emerson Scholarship for accounting students who, like me, were working their way through college without family support. I knew Grandma would have approved of helping ambitious young people who shared my passion for numbers. Third, I set aside a portion in a trust for future needs, investing it conservatively, as Grandma had taught me. What I didn't do was bail out Jason. Dad eventually had to use his retirement savings to cover Jason's debts, and for the first time he insisted that Jason get financial counseling and find steady employment. It was a hard lesson for both of them, but perhaps a necessary one. About 6 months after the legal battle, Dad reached out asking to meet for coffee. I agreed more out of curiosity than any desire for reconciliation. We sat at a small cafe, two men who looked similar but had lived very different lives. "The house looks good," he said awkwardly. "The new paint color suits it." "I wouldn't know," I replied. "I sold it." He seemed genuinely surprised. "After everything you went through to get it back, it wasn't about the house, Dad. It was about respecting Grandma's wishes and standing up for myself. The house was just a building. What mattered was that it was mine to decide what to do with." He nodded slowly, stirring his coffee, though he hadn't added anything to it. "Jason's doing better. Working at my friend's insurance company. Seeing a therapist about his spending habits." "I'm glad to hear that." "Bryant," he said, looking directly at me for what felt like the first time in years I was wrong. "What I did was wrong, and I'm sorry." The apology was so unexpected that for a moment I didn't know how to respond. It didn't erase the past or heal all wounds, but it was something I had never heard from him before. "Thank you for saying that," I finally replied. "Your grandmother would be proud of how you handled everything," he added. "She always said you had a backbone of steel under that quiet exterior." We talked for another hour, not solving everything, but perhaps laying the groundwork for a different kind of relationship. One based on mutual respect, rather than the old dynamics that had hurt us both. As for Jason, we're taking smaller steps. A text message here, a brief call there. I don't expect us to ever be close, but I no longer feel the resentment that once consumed me when I thought of him. The greatest gift in this painful journey has been the discovery of my own strength. Grandma Marion always told me I had it in me to stand tall, and she was right. Sometimes you have to lose something valuable to gain something invaluable, like self-respect and the knowledge that you can weather life's storms. I still miss my grandmother every day. In my new home, I have a small table by the window where I keep her photo and the first checkbook she helped me balance. It reminds me that family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about who believes in you when no one else does. Have you ever had to stand up to family for what was rightfully yours? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences. And if you know someone who might be going through something similar, share this video with them so they know they are not alone. Thank you for listening, and remember that sometimes the hardest battles are fought against the people who should be protecting us the most. But winning those battles can lead to the greatest growth